Surrey Sound Book Club.
My name's Meg and I work for the stock team in Surrey Library Services.
And I'm Tina. I'm at Redhill Library and do sort of all children-y sort of things here.
Today we're looking at horror novels. Obviously Halloween is just around the corner. So Meg, what is the appeal of horror or ghost stories, do you think?
I think people sometimes like something that makes them a bit uncomfortable, and also like things that make you jump out of your seat. So like, you know, Susan Hill's Woman in Black, the book, it's obviously been made into a film as well, but I went to see the stage show a couple of times and people are literally jumping out of their seats and screaming, and they go like again and again and again, because I think people just like things that get them out of their seats. It's the adrenaline rush as well. So it's like one part of it's the big scares, and one part of it is the things that just make you think and make you feel a little off centre.
Do you think books like that, which have you kind of jumping out of your chair, are have got to be read once? Because if you read them again, you know what's going to happen, and it takes away that edge.
I think for me, yes, I definitely say I'd only read them once, because, yeah, you have that moment, but when you read again, you know it's coming, so you're just like, you either get on with it, because I know it's coming, or it just doesn't make you jump at all, because it's just like, I've been there, done that. But some people, they read these things over and over and over again, like Carrie by Stephen King. Some people have read that like 5 times, and it's just like, well, I've read it once, but I don't feel the need to go back there.
You could say that there are some aspects of the book which, when you read the first time, you want to know what happens and you rattle through it. And then the second reading, knowing what happens, there's the more subtle things you pick up on.
There is that as well. I mean, there's certainly that element of when you're rereading stuff and you're like, oh, I never noticed that before, because you were so like going from adrenaline rush to adrenaline rush and jump to jump that you were missing all the bits in between. And Stephen King especially, because he writes some quite heavy tomes, the first time it's all about the scares, but the second time it's all about the characters, I think.
Tina, you said that you did children-y things in the library, as it were. What about children and youngsters? Do they like the horror stories? Thinking of books like Witches by Roald Dahl.
Children love to be frightened. You know, when you're frightened, it's an emotion, and we all live by our emotions. It's an important part of our lives, and even young people, children, it's an important thing to get frightened and scared, and you learn from that. So The Witches, by Roald Dahl, probably one of my favourite Roald Dahl books, actually, because I think I love the idea of this little boy being turned into a mouse, you know, and then causing havoc. And I love the idea, the fact that these witches can peel their faces off. You know, there's nothing nicer than for a child than to actually have this thought and vision of a person peeling their face off. It's just wonderful, and it evokes this wonderful emotion of fear, trepidation, and excitement. Don't forget that with fear you get excitement, and we all love to be excited, don't we?
I mean, witches play a big part in a lot of stories, not just obviously Roald Dahl, but thinking of Harry Potter, where there's lots of witches and wizards. Is that still popular with children today?
The whole J.K. Rowling series, Harry Potter series, is constantly not on our shelves. In fact, I've recently just ordered with the help of Meg, the whole set again, because we can't have enough of them. And I don't know what it is about the story, the Harry Potter story, but I think even grown-ups, it involves everybody. There's a warm feel about this. She's very clever, J.K. Rowling. She gives this warm, homely feel, and then she slides these Dementors, these evil, you know, Voldemorty people, Slytherins, you know, wonderful snake-like. You know, there's something about it, but it's about emotion, and it's about encapsulating that. It's about ownership of that, and it's about excitement. It's great to be excited emotionally, and horror and fear does that.
I think one of the things about J.K. Rowling is that she can write on different levels. So the books have got appeal for kids going to school with the the sweets on the train in the very first episode, and the swapping of the cards and things like that. But also adults get something very different out of the same storyline. So I think she's very clever in appealing to adults as well as children.
Yeah, she weaves a very clever web, actually. You know, talking of spiders and things, the lovely spiders in the story there, and yeah, she researches so cleverly as well. I mean, she goes into the fables and the mythology, you know, because you know horror is all about mythology as well, you know, and history, and she's a great researcher, and it works. But I think now we are all desperate for Harry Potter to be introduced to us yet again. You know, we need more Harry Potter, because I think we're all chomping at the bit now. Because I've read the books lots and lots of times, and of course there's the movies. The books are always better because you can use your imagination. The films are great because it colours things. You know, you've got to read the books because there's so much more in the books.
I remember my one of my sons went to see the film, having avidly read the books, and was disappointed because of so much was left out. But of course, there's only so much you can put into a 2-hour film. But one other aspect is, do you find that parents don't want their children to be frightened? They want to kind of protect them from the evils of the world, as it were.
There are parents out there that have restricted, you know, though they can't read the Harry Potter series. You know, they're not old enough, which is fine, fair enough. I mean, you know, it's purely their choice. And that has to be, as you know, respected by us as library people, you know, because you know, it's not always what that family might want. But the books are there. Eventually, the children will find them, and it's their choice. And we're here to guide and to, you know, and if there's other stories out there that are more gentle. So you've got the Worst Witch books by Jill Murphy, and she's a lovely witch. She really is. She's so, you know, so it isn't just about Harry Potter. There are other sort of witchy, scary stories, and Jill Murphy's The Worst Witch is probably one of my favourite children's witchy stories. And you know, even picture books have them. You know, it's out there. You've got what's the Corky, the
Winnie the Witch.
Winnie the Witch. You know, and that's done in rhyme. You know, and it flows so beautifully, but it's very gentle. You know, horror doesn't have to be scary for children, but it's something that children eventually do find, and if it's written in a very gentle way. Such as The Worst Witch and Winnie the Witch, it's fine, you know. I mean, there are religious, you know, families out there that don't want their children to be involved in that. That's fine. We will respect that. I mean, you know, but it's down to individual families at the end of the day. It's just that we have to cater for everybody, and you know, and we're there to sort of help and advise.
But witches have been appearing in horror, I suppose you could say horror books for hundreds of years, thinking back to Macbeth in Shakespeare and the three witches there, they were quite fearsome. Meg, back to you. There have been some really dark stories written in the past. I remember 20, 30 odd years ago reading the books by Dennis Wheatley. I don't seem to see him anywhere. What's happened to him?
Yeah, he was really, really popular in the 70s, and then he just seems to have faded away. A lot of people aren't even aware of Dennis Wheatley anymore. You say his name, and they're like, who? But yeah, once upon a time, he was massive. He was very sort of dark and occulty kind of themes, wasn't he? But yeah, I just remember in the 80s, towards the end of the 80s, there being so many of his in the charity shops. I think everyone was sort of moved on to other authors now. But some authors just stay popular. I mean, Stephen King's been around how long? He's still writing. He's still massively popular. James Herbert, again, is still on our shelves. I mean, I remember my friends reading him in school, getting very into like reading The Rats and all those scary stories and feeling very grown up because you were reading some horror. So, and Dean R. Coots, again, he's been around for a long, long time and he's still very popular. He's still sitting on our shelves. A lot of his have been republished recently.
You mentioned Stephen King there, but what authors in particular, apart from Stephen King, who are popular?
Well, like I said, Dean R. Coots is very popular still. James Herbert's still popular. There's always the classics like Bram Stoker's Dracula and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein are still around. People still ask for Lovecraft. But of the new ones, there's a lot of fads that come and go, like the sparkly vampires, for example. Interview with a Vampire used to be massive, isn't so much anymore, but they're doing a television series of it now, so maybe it'll get popular again. Charlaine Harris went through a very good phase because she wrote the books that True Blood are based on, and they've just done a TV series of her Midnight to Texas series of books. That's on the Sci-Fi Channel. So there's fads that come and go all the time, and especially the sort of romantic kind where it's like werewolf falls in love with vampire, vampire falls in love with vampire who's in love with werewolf, all that kind of thing.
Oh, love triangle.
Yes. Yes, they're proving very popular. Yeah.
You mentioned things on television. I noticed that I think it was Channel 4 did have done this recently, The Handmaid's Tale. And I've got a list of horror books, I guess they could be described as, and that's listed in one of them, Margaret Atwood. I was surprised to see that on there. It's a dark story, but I was surprised to see that as a horror story.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the themes are a bit disturbing, but it's not something I would normally class as horror. It's more kind of alternative, futury, science fiction-y. I'm not sure I would put it in a horror category. I noticed on your list you also had Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick. And again, his are a bit disturbing, and they do make you think outside of the box sometimes, but I'm not sure I'd class him as horror either, because there's a series on Channel 4 of his stuff at the moment, short stories inspired by Philip K. Dick, and that's a really interesting television series, and it's kind of horror-ish elements, but again, I'm not sure I'd put them in the horror class.
Looking at this list, which this is from a website called shortlist.com. It's a page, the 30 scariest books ever written. Obviously, it's mentioned some of the books you've mentioned, like Frankenstein and The Exorcist and Dracula. Now, we've spoken about The Handmaid's Tale. It also includes The Witches by Roald Dahl. But there were one or two books which I didn't really consider to be horror books as such. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is in that list, but I wouldn't have necessarily said, yes, it's a very black story and can be very scary in places, and but not exactly horror. I don't know whether there's anything on this list which you think is perhaps worth a read, which is not so well known.
The one that we would definitely recommend on this list that we wouldn't necessarily class as horror, it's kind of just gothic, really, don't you think?
It dips its toe, perhaps. That's the best way.
Yes.
It's very subtle, and it just dips its big toe into it, and that's the Neil Gaiman Coraline. So if you want, if you're not used to reading horror, all right, and you want to maybe just gently introduce yourself to a bit of horror, then Neil Gaiman, who uses wonderful words, and he's very atmospheric, I think he is Coraline. So just gently try that. It's not gonna, your skin isn't gonna depart from your body, put it that way, all right. But it's just gonna make that maybe a tingle, put it that way. Have a tingle with Neil Gaiman, Coraline.
And do either of you have a favourite horror novel?
Horror isn't my thing, but I mean, there's one book that isn't horror, but it's probably the author is on the list, but it's not considered. I don't consider it is James Herbert's Fluke. I love that story. It's about this dog, and it's really a man reincarnated into this dog, and it's his adventures and his emotions and feelings. So yeah, I quite like Fluke, but it isn't a horror book at all. No, it's full of emotions, really. And as I said, horror is a really, being scared, it's a very, very strong emotion, and we all like to be scared, So yeah, I go for James Herbert's Fluke.
It's quite hard to get hold of now, but Chas Brenchley's Dispossession is really interesting. It's about a dispossessed angel, but I thought it was really good, and it's really different, and it is disturbing as well. It's quite dark, but it's really well written. Chas Brenchley's not around as much as he used to be, but I definitely would recommend giving that one a read. And also Stephen King's Misery. You can tell it's a Stephen King theme coming through, but I can't talk about horror and not talk about him, because I think he is one of the greatest horror writers. I think he writes so many different kinds and styles of it. But Misery, when I read that, I read it long before the film came along, and it was just so evocative, the emotion, the actual atmosphere of it. And it's like two different books in one, because the book he's actually writing is as important as the book around it, if you see what I mean. So yeah, I definitely recommend that one. And they're both, and the book he's writing within it is kind of a gothic horror kind of story. And yeah, it's good. Read it.